conquer and we're going to take some. Is that understood? Yes, sir. That's what we're going to do, sweethearts. We are going to go and get some. All right, people, on the ready line. Are you me? Yeah! Are you me? Yeah! What are you? What are you?
The Exceptional Parent Magazine March issue covers helpful information on hearing, vision, and speech impairments. As always, there is a special military section as well. Sign up to read for free and receive the free monthly newsletter at epmagazine.com.
Monotony. It comes in all shapes and sizes. Dull, tedious, just plain boring. But what is this? A contender, perhaps? Something unboring by the looks of it. Jabs right at dull, an uppercut to tedium, something that keeps you on your toes, keeps your head on a swivel, a knockout punch to your old, boring workouts. Welcome to Fight Camp.
Oscar Mike Radio is a proud podcast partner of Reach Across America Radio, heard every Thursday at 11 a.m. and Sunday at 8 a.m. Eastern. They're also big supporters of the nonprofit I Got Your Six, Two Lives at Once. And with every wreath you sponsor through Oscar Mike Radio, $5 goes back to this great organization dedicated to making a difference in the lives of veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders battling PTSD. Two Lives at Once pairs these brave men and women together with dogs rescued from kill shelters. In this way, two lives are saved at the same time by saving each other. Donate now. Go to reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio to help. That's reachacrossamerica.org/Oscar Mike Radio.
I remember a time when I was in a not so good place, and these games and these activities and being able to come and have the camaraderie that we have here, it makes me feel like I'm not alone. There are people here that have been through what I've been through. It makes me feel like I don't know, I'm part of something great.
Just let yourself go. Give it a try.
Hello and welcome again to Oscar Mike Radio. My name is Travis, Marine Corps veteran and your host. Oscar Mike Radio is co-produced by Sinister One Productions. What's your podcast doing? I want to thank my sponsors, Joyce Asack of Asack Real Estate, and my supporters, Travis Arnold, Army National Guard veteran of Caisson Shaving Company, Exceptional Parent Magazine, Thank You Faye Simon, and Fight Camp. Be your strongest combination. It's we're moving through the year. I love the topic we're going to talk about with my next guest. Right up there with helicopters, even though I'm a Marine, submarines hold a great deal of fascination, inspiration, satisfaction to me for a lot of reasons, personal and professional. I think of submarines as like earthbound spaceships. and the people that work on the subs or boats, the bottom guns, are just a special breed. And my next guest is a Navy commander, served in the submarine forces, and author. We're going to talk about his book, Submerged. Commander Henry Rausch, welcome to Oscar Mike Radio.
Thank you very much for having me.
So you reached out to me and you got this book, and I checked it out, and I'm like, I'm in. I drop what you're doing, stop the press, stop the tape. Let's get this guy on. I want to go and learn all about, what you do. You've served in the Navy. You're a writer. You've authored multiple books. You're a private pilot, so you're below water, on the earth, in the air. You're like a supreme being in my view. But let's start off with the beginning. Who is Henry Rausch, and how did he go into the Navy, please?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, thank you. I was a Navy brat. My dad was a career master chief in the Navy, and he was a naval corpsman. And like we were talking before, a lot of experience with the Marine Corps as he served with the Marines for 6 years, and he was in Vietnam and then gone at sea a lot. Um, I I studied pretty hard and got a scholarship to Stanford. I wanted to be a doctor, and Stanford's very good about, they put me in hospitals, they put me working with doctors, and after 3 years, I realized I didn't want to be a doctor. Nothing against doctors, it wasn't for me. And then, but I had this chemistry degree, and I had a very high GPA because that's one of the things about getting in med school. You have to keep your GPA up. It's kind of cutthroat that way. And what was I going to do? And the Navy recruiters came to me and basically gave me a deal. They said, "We'll send you for training for 2 years in nuclear power training, and we'll commission you to go to officer candidate school and then submarine school. And after that, spend 3 years on a submarine." And just sounded exciting, one. And two, I did have a military background growing up as a Navy brat. So I knew a little bit about what I was getting into, not as much as it turned out I did. But that's why I joined. I went to officer candidate school and then went through the nuclear power training, which consists of going book learning for 6 months and operating a nuclear reactor for 6 months, and then submarine school, and then to my boat. And I talk about all about that in the book. Just my progression. I spent 3 years as a junior officer. And then I taught at UCLA for a while at a ROTC unit in UCLA. Then went back to sea as a weapons officer, and then decided to get out of active. And after about 11 years, spent about 11 years in the reserves and retired as a commander. And that's it, short and sweet.
Love it, love it. What was it like when you dove for the first time and you realize, oh, this is for real? The ocean is literally closing over the boat, and now we're in this for real. Does it ever get old, the whole submerging process?
It doesn't get old, and you're very cognizant. To be honest with you, when I was junior and I didn't know enough to really understand all that was happening, all that was going, all the checks that had to be made to submerge. I'll be honest with you, I kind of treated it, the first time, to answer your question, was kind of like being on an elevator. You don't think of all the interlocks on an elevator, you just trust it. Now, if you had actually engineered an elevator and you're responsible for all the interlocks and safeties, you'd think a lot more when you stepped on that elevator. And I think the situation is kind of similar where, yeah, the first time, to answer your question, I didn't really think about it. That's what submarines do. They go down and they go up. Yeah. Now, as an officer responsible for that, and I talk about in the book, it's a little bit more sobering, right? There's a lot of things that have to happen correctly. You have about 100 men. There's women in submarines now, and there's just men then. So I'm not being sexist. It was just men, back
Right.
then. There's about 100 men, and every single one of you depends on every single area to do its job. Not dissimilar in the Marine Corps, when you're in a fire base or something, it's there's no fakers there. There's nobody, and different people have different reputations, but by and large, you trust everyone else do their job to bring you back safely.
What were some of your highlights of being on a submarine? Because again, one of the things that interests me is you're out there. Like I have read where even I wouldn't say enemies, but other foreign submarine, commands, they could be off the coast of San Diego, off the coast of Jersey at any time. And if you're not on your game, you won't even know that they're there. You'll never know that they're there. What's it like being in that kind of environment day in and day out? And sir?
Yeah, they well, hopefully, if they're right off the coast, we will know about them. That's our job, right? Is to keep tabs of that kind of things, and that's so to I think the best answer to your question you said in the prelude, it's not dissimilar to being a spaceship, earthbound spaceship. I would say it's much, much more like being on a spaceship than being on a spaceship is, and I talk about this in the book. And the reason I say that is. If you're on the International Space Station and stuff, and not taking anything away from them, but they talk to their families every day. They get emails. There's one guy, Canadian guy, does YouTube videos for Pete's sakes. There was and I talk about this in the book. There was one astronaut. I think she hacked into her lover's bank account from outer space. I mean, you're not separated in any stretch of imagination. On a submarine, we would go out for approximately 85 days. We would be submerged and recirculating, have absolutely no contact with anyone. It's kind of like going into a coma and coming out of a coma 3 months later and saying, like, imagine, we're recording this in January, fine. Imagine going into a coma in October and now waking up now and, oh, who's president? What happened? And what happened? I mean, all that is completely, it's a blank part in your life. And the reason is, the missions we did, we could not transmit, because if we transmitted anything, just a tiny little scrap, just an erg of energy, it would have, given, like you said, the enemy away our position. Where we were, we just could not allow that. Now, we did receive messages, and I talk about this in the book, but it's very, very low rate. It's what's called 50 baud, which is about as fast as a slow typist types. And we would take about, I don't know, maybe a dozen pages a day is all we could copy. And so they would just be restricted to vital traffic. We would get something called news and sports, which if there was room left at the end of the broadcast, they would put some snippets, kind of like headlines. But I talk about actually in the book, a lot of times you couldn't trust that news and sports. And the reason you couldn't, the missions we did, without going into a lot of detail, we would carry a bunch of, we called them riders. They weren't attached to the submarine, but they had special skills in electronics and other in languages and things. And a lot of them would hang out in radio, and they would be known to take liberties with the news and sports. They would make things up, and you kind of lived in this kind of fog of truths and half truths, truths and lies, and some people were taken in on it. Yeah, I talk about that in the book. Some kind of egregious lies they thought were real, and there's all kinds of stories of them doing that. So you never really trusted news and sports.
So that leads me to my next thought, and I thought about this a lot. I never asked my friend who I knew personally for a long time who did subs, is you're underwater for 85, 90 days. What's it like when the hatch open and the fresh air comes into the sub?
Yeah, fresh air sounds. I'll tell you, after about 2 hours on the boat, you become completely inured to there is quite a stink about it. And the stink, I'll tell you something. This is all submarines have these stories. They'll come home with a duffel bag of clothes, and it's just noxious. And when you're breathing, regular air. And your wife just says, do not bring that in. Just leave it out on the porch for a couple of days for the stink to get off. So it's kind of it's a mix of there's diesel, there's body odor. Obviously, there's something called amine, which is what we use to control the carbon dioxide, which I think your readers would be very interested how we do that, how we or your listeners rather, sorry, would be interested in how we control that. To answer your question, the fresh air, you could definitely tell you're breathing fresh air. It was always a crapshoot. The pressure after what we call recirculating, where we maintain our environment, had no contact whatsoever outside, for about 85 days. Like I said, we'd go on runs. When you first crack the hatch, there's going to be a pressure differential. And it's you're either going to be over pressurized in the boat or under pressurized. If it's under pressurized, you can't get that hatch open. You're going to have to bleed some air to equalize the pressure. I've had one case where it was over pressurized and the hatch just flew right on my hands and just slammed up. And it's kind of dangerous. So it smells different, and also you got to watch the pressure because it could hurt you.
It's just a very interesting life. And, one of the things that I've read sub stories where, the UK, the Russians, us will play games with each other. What's that like? Because is it kind of understood, okay, I'm trying to find you, you're trying to find me, or can it escalate to where, you know what, we're going to load the torpedoes and, take one. I'm exaggerating here, right? But there's an element where I'm reading stories of both sides kind of plying their craft to see who could outdo the other. And but it's for real. This is not like Call of Duty or, Microsoft Flight Simulator. This is for real. How do you all manage that?
Yeah, I'll tell you this, it's less cowboy than is depicted in the popular media.
Okay.
A couple things. First is you're a Marine yourself. You have rules of engagement, right? I mean, those you live and die by rule. I mean, nobody. That's one. My big objections. I love all the popular media, but where this skipper had to do something, and then I don't know, the CIA guy teleprompters on board and it says to do something else. Skipper goes, "Oh, I'll do something else." Yeah, everybody knows in the military you don't do that. You follow orders. You follow your orders. We have rules of engagement. All United States military units have an essential right of defense, but right of defense does not, that's extremely circumscribed in a lot of cases. But the larger answer to your question is, it wasn't like, hey, we're here. What are we going to do? Let's go mix it up. No, you go out on a mission and you have defined objectives. It's not giving away the and first of all, let me say as preface, my book was vetted by the DoD for release. So everything I'm saying was vetted by the DoD, and that's something you don't want to mess around with. And to your listeners, I imagine you have a lot of servicemen. I really encourage you to write about your stories just for yourself, just for your family, if nothing else. If you're going to publish, it's not hard to do. It's called Department of Pre-Propagation Security Review, DOPSR. Night and day, it's not hard to do. You send it to them. It took me about 2.5 months. Get that approved because you don't want to be on the other side of that. You don't want to have somebody knocking on your door. We'd like to talk to you about what you published. That being said, the main role during peacetime, during the Cold War, was intelligence collection. That's not classified, but it's not just collect everything. You had a very specific list of targets that you needed to collect, and they were prioritized. And if you were doing prioritize 5 and prioritize 4 availed itself, you didn't go off cowboy. You followed the rules, and their limits. And I would say it was extremely safe. There were a couple things that I probably shouldn't relate that maybe we felt less safe, but in general, it was not kind of, hey, let's let's do this today. It was a rigorous process.
So we're going to get in the book here in a second. I got a couple more topics to cover. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking to Navy Commander retired Henry Rausch about his book Submerged, submarines, right there with helicopters, or two of the things where I kind of really nerd out and just want to dive into, pun intended. I want to go back to maybe not the Cold War, but maybe at the end of the Cold War with the Kursk. That's the Russian submarine that, had a catastrophic end. And I watched a couple documentaries on it. I've read some stuff on it, and the Russians will still maintain to this day that we fired a torpedo at the Kursk, and that's what caused the Kursk to fail. And they make a pretty convincing case. I know it's Russia, I know it's propaganda, but they make a pretty convincing case that the U.S. fired on the Kursk. That's just a stretch to me, but I want to know what you thought about that.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. A couple things. One, I never actually heard that. I've read a number of books about that, and but that I'm sure that was in the media. I'm sure there's a lot of intemperate things said. There is a kernel of truth in that a torpedo was involved. They were testing a kind of a rocket propelled torpedo, and my understanding was, and again, I don't have any personal knowledge, but from what I read, they were testing some different type of a propellant than had been used before, and there was some kind of as I recall, there were 2 explosions. There was a small one, then a large one, and the smaller one is attributed to initial detonation of that propellant, and the larger one subsequently detonated the warheads, and that's what put paid to that ship. As far as people shooting a torpedo, and like back to my original statement. Rules of engagement are you don't violate them. There is an inherent sense of self-defense, but just think about it. I mean, why would you, if just shoot a torpedo willy-nilly? That doesn't make any sense. In my book, I talk about the USS Scorpion, which was one of the two nuclear submarines the United States lost. It sank. It sank in 1968. And there were kind of rumors that actually, we talked earlier, you want to talk about the Glomar Explorer and the retrieval of the parts of the Zulu that sank there. There were rumors going about that was retribution for the Zulu, that we had collided with the Zulu. I think there was I can't remember, it was Seawolf or somebody came back in a Pearl. Again, this is all in the common knowledge. Came with a smashed sail, and there was rumors that we had accidentally sunk her by colliding with her, and so in retribution, the Scorpion. Again, this is all just kind of conspiracy theory. Nobody knows for sure what sank the Scorpion. I'd be very, very surprised if somebody shot a torpedo at her. I think I talk about it in my book. There's a couple theories. One is a torpedo actually went off on that ship, own ship's torpedo. The one more likely, I think, and I talk about this in the book a lot, is it was a battery explosion. So a nuclear submarine has a lot of ways to bring us back home in case we lose the reactor. It's got a lot of stored pressurized air, can blow to the surface. We've also got a diesel generator. Once we're on the surface, we can generate power with. But to get us up there, we've got a huge battery. It's at the bottom of the ship, and it's to give you an idea, it's 126 cells. Each cell is about half a ton. It's basically kind of the weight of a VW Bug. So we have 126 of those. And when we charge that, it's like and they're just like, they're lead acid. They're like your car battery. When we charge them, if you ever notice when you put your car battery on charge, you see these bubbles. That's hydrogen coming off. And we got to get rid of that hydrogen, or else it'll blow up. Hydrogen's the explosive. It's a Hindenburg, right? And so if you ask me, my personal opinion, I think it was a hydrogen. So it's a long way to answer your question. No, I think it's kind of, I don't want to say irresponsible, but it does sound like kind of propaganda or whatever. Talk about
it was a Russian, their interpretation of it, that I saw in the documentary, their film of it, but it was just a very interesting take that wasn't relayed in the American media at the time. So I found it very interesting. Okay, last topic before we get into the book, and I can't wait to get in the book. I keep reading about the HMS Gotland, the Swedish diesel-powered sub that came in and sank quote, sank, close quote, the USS Ronald Reagan. And, I know it was a war game. I know it was set up with different conditions to test different things. I know that in, perimeter defense, when you're testing them, you kind of want a breach to happen to learn from it. But could that ever happen in real life? And the reason I ask is, some of our subs and like the Gerald Ford are advanced watercraft, right? I mean, advanced. We have advanced detection systems. I've been on a couple Arleigh Burkes, and I'm like, they can see a lot. So could it happen? Could the HMS Gotland have really done that in real life, sir?
So the best answer to your question is it did happen in the 1982 war in Falklands. The HMS Conqueror did sink the General Belgrano, a converted U.S. cruiser. I mean, that's fact. It did happen. So so submarines can sink surface ships, and there's a lot of sensors. And countervailing against those sensors are ocean currents. I talk about that a lot in the book. There's the ocean environment. There's thermoclines. There's changes in temperature. Sound is just like when you're driving in your car and you kind of like drive your wheels onto the gravel side, and your wheel tugs to the gravel, right? Sound does the exact same thing. So if there's a thermocline, sound will go to where it goes slower, and you could be real close and not hear that submarine because the sound's going away. And that's it's not dissimilar from your background, Marines. You know how to use the environment, right? The environment for tactical advantage. identical to submarines. Submarines use the environment for tactical advantage. So in general, yes, a submarine could sink a service ship. Now, the specifics of the Gotland, I don't know. I trust our ASW forces a lot. I will say one more thing about the Falkland Islands War. There was a Argentine, and I talk about this in my book again. There was an Argentinian skipper. He had a German Type 209. Now, 209 was not like the Gotland. It was a more rudimentary vessel. It was not an AIP. AIP is kind of halfway between a regular diesel boat and a nuclear boat. They can stay underwater longer. They got fuel cells. 209 is maybe the apotheosis of diesel design, right? But it was very capable ship. To answer, long story short, she launched 6 torpedoes at British. He had them right in their hairs, a couple thousand yards. That war would have been completely changed if those torpedoes ran straight. For some reason, they didn't run straight. He had some kind of fundamental error in his fire control system, so they did not go out on the bearing who was shooting him. That's the only thing that saved the British. Can you imagine if the Argentinians had sunk one or both of the carriers that went down there? He had them right in their sights. Now, he endured like 24 hours of depth charging after each shot. And after a while, he said, hell, these aren't going, I'm going back home. These aren't going out right. But he would have changed the history of that war if those torpedoes had run true. So yes, in general, submarines can service ships, can sink ships, and that's their job. That being said, you're quite right. Arleigh Burke, I've been out myself. It's an amazing warship. I trust our ASW forces.
This is just we could just keep talking about this kind of stuff all day. I'm getting ahead of myself here, but we're here, and I'm with Commander Rausch, and he's an author amongst other things, and we're talking about your book Submerged. So you collect, compile, amass this wealth of knowledge about your MOS, your job, and what you do for the submarine force and the people that you serve with, those fine sailors, right? And you want to write this book. And it's not like, Tom Clancy's book. It's a very different, feel because it's from somebody who actually did that. But before that, what kind of led you to say, you know what, I really want to take my experiences and make a narrative about it?
Yeah, thanks. I wrote it for 3 reasons. Reason number 1 was I talked to my buds and stuff, and just like talking to you, Travis, and they'd say I had no idea, and I realized the number of people that know about subs is really small. You go into a Walmart, there might be one person that knows about that world, and so I just wanted to get it out there, because it's neat and it's something just like there's a lot of movies about the Marines, you got to admit, and there are some movies about submarines, maybe not as many, but I wanted to get it out there. That's one. 2, I kind of wanted to cast it in amber already because a lot of things have changed and that era has gone. For one thing, our main mission during the Cold War was interdiction of Soviet submarines and service ships. If it came to war, and during peacetime intelligence collection, we were very much lone wolves. After that, our goals were, we became a strike platform in addition to those others. So one, the mission changed after the Cold War. We never really had a strike mission. By strike mission, I mean launching Tomahawks, and you've seen them, into Iraq and whatnot during the war. We never really, there was some of that, but we didn't really have that mission. So the mission changed. Also, the platform changed. So I was just reading one of my blogs yesterday. The new submarines, which I've not been on, the Virginia class, don't have diving officer to watch, chief of the watch, 2 helmsman planesmen like I was familiar with. They've got 2 pilots. There's a lot of automation. They've got very senior people operating the ship as they're actually called pilots. And a lot of things we did very manual intensive are gone. It's automated. It's much more like flying a plane. The other big thing that's changed is, again, back in my day, I sound like an old guy. We had periscopes. We looked through periscopes. We were constrained by a lot of things by using those periscopes. It was, I don't want to say it was a crapshoot. I don't want to give a sense that we're cowboys, but I talk about a lot in the book. Again, with the thermoclines, with the changes in water temperature, a lot of times you get up and be very surprised. There'd be a ship there you had no idea was right on top of you. And there's been about a dozen accidents where lives have been lost because submarines have come up and collided with ships they didn't know was there. That's changed a lot. Now we don't have those type of periscopes anymore. We have these fiber optics that give a better view of things. So the second reason I did it was kind of to put it in amber, there was a fellow, Richard Henry Dana, in 1840s. He went to Harvard, didn't go to Stanford, but he went to Harvard. I don't think Stanford existed then. But he got out, and instead of becoming a doctor or lawyer, he got on a whaling ship, and he wrote this book 2 years before the mast. And that book, Cast in Amber, if you want to know what it was like to be on a whaling ship in 1840, you read that book, because they just all the details. And that's what I was kind of doing. I wanted to cast in amber how it was for that, because that age is kind of gone. And the third reason I wrote the book was I was kind of frustrated what was out there. I'd read some very good books that I really enjoyed by relatively junior enlisted people, and those really told it like it was. And I could not say that about the books that I read. I'm not, throwing anybody in their butts, but the books that I had read, from senior officers, I want to say they kind of all drank the Kool-Aid. They all, it was kind of whitewashed. I mean, I'll tell you this, I have read reviews of cruises on Travelocity, a TripAdvisor, that had more fear and hate in them than I've ever read in any book written by a senior officer about the submarine force. I mean, these people drank the Kool-Aid, and I'm very much a patriot, but I'm a patriot with open eyes, and there's goods and bads, and I wanted to get that out there and have a kind of countervailing.
Well, that's one of the things I noticed. You talk about the book where there's true like family consequences because that husband's cut off from his wife, and if there's problems going on, it causes tension. And I don't remember that being in like Red October or even the movie on the K-19 Widowmaker or anything else. I thought that was very interesting that you put that kind of real world context in there. Like, what does happen when you have a family issue? And I think people need to understand that there's a cost to what you all do as submariners.
My wife miscarried when I was at sea. I got a message I couldn't return. I had to stay on the boat, and she had to deal with that herself. A couple runs later, I went to sea knowing my kid would be born while I was at sea. That's fine. That's what you signed up for. But I got this message, like a month and a half too early from when he's supposed to be born, saying, "Oh, he's born. Everything is fine." I knew he wasn't fine. I knew something, but they're not going to tell you because they want you focused on your job. And there was a long period there, and I talk about this in the book, where I really didn't know if they were alive or dead, because I knew they wouldn't tell me if they had died, because they want me focused. So it was kind of stressful. So yeah, so imagine, like you get a message, a month and a half early, your kid's born, everybody's okay, don't worry about it. And I talk about that in the book, on the Scorpion. It's kind of a sad chapter in history. Scorpion sank 6 days before she was supposed to return to Norfolk. Well, they knew she had sunk, right? I mean, they could hear the explosion and all that, but they let the wives and children just get on the pier and never told them. Oh, sorry, it didn't show up. And they came home, they found on the news the Scorpion. That's how they found out. They let them get on the pier, even though knowing it had blown up. So all that was going through my head, that are they alive or dead? And I didn't know. And I don't want to paint myself as like a victim. That's just what you sign up for. You're told something bad happens, you're probably not going to be told because we want you focused. I talk about others. We had these things called familygrams. We could actually, I was a little bit imprecise when I said we didn't get any info. We got these things called familygrams, like 50 words. Basically, they were postcards, and your wife would fill out 50 words and couldn't say anything operational or anything bad on it. That would be edited out. And it was generally the cat's fine, whatever, all this stuff.
Sir, wait a minute. Your wife only had 50 words to communicate with you. Most wives aren't even getting warmed up at 50 words. Most wives need about 5,000 to get it all out. How?
You would be surprised. So let me tell you, first of all, there are no better cryptographers in the United States than submariners wise because they have got these codes all worked out that nobody can break, So as long as it's worked out ahead of time, it's amazing what they can put in 50 words. And it's quite funny. And like I said, I talk about it in the book, you know, uh, they have ways of getting words out. So you give them I think about 4 or 5 of these postcards. Long story short, and this is kind of a sad case. One fellow, his wife left him in the middle of the run. That happens a lot. It's a very tough, divorce and separations are really hard. Just like from your deployments in the Marines. Um, so his wife just handed out these cards to random people in the apartment complex, and it shouldn't have gone through, but he starts getting these familygrams. You don't know me, but your wife left you. It's like crazy. And can you imagine being submerged for 85 days on a steel tube and you start getting these messages like that? I mean, yeah, it's tough.
You write the book, and I always ask authors this. You put this to pen and paper, or on the word processor, the Microsoft Word, and you get it done, and you finally get it to a publisher, and you hold that first copy. What was it like thumbing through your book and seeing your words on print for the first time, sir?
Well, I'm a submariner, so I had no elation or pride. Every little tiny micro niggle, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I let that through. And I was very, very hard on myself. And to answer your question, what I did, I got that author proof, as it's called, and I went through with a pen, and everything, even if it was like on the gray area, I was like, and I marked that thing up like a big dog. And then I edited it right on the spot. So yeah, it was. Yeah, it's gratifying to answer your question. I think it's much more gratifying actually not to see my words in print than to get a review. And I've gotten some very nice comments from people, submariners, who said, "Look, you told it like it was. Just they said I smelled the amine when I read your book. I smelled the diesel like this. I captured it, and that I'll yeah see my words in print. Yeah, that's nice. As long as they weren't messed up. But I was much more gratified when I got responses from my fellow submariners.
Now, has your family given you any feedback about the book when they read it?
My wife read it, and she read it, and she would give me comments. I got some good comments from other family members. My sister, actually, I want to give a shout out to her. It's a rough around the edges book. It's not PC, and I'll tell anybody that right now. Winston Churchill, one of my favorite quotes from him. He said, "We sleep soundly at night because rough men stand ready to do violence, for us." Those rough men are not PC. Those rough men are, you'd kick them out of 1,000 Facebook groups for the kind of things that. So it is. So she toned down some of the roughness out of that, and I really thank her for that.
The future of submarine warfare seems to be getting more and more advanced. To your point about automation, I'm familiar with, by way of example, my only comparison is the USS Zumwalt. It's that ship built in Bath, Maine that, there's only 3 of them, and it's so automated now and so advanced that they don't even know what to do with it. Do you ever see a point where AI, robotics, and other things can replace submarines? And the reason I ask that is you have drones now, pound for pound, weight for weight, inflicting massive damage on targets that, like the F-35, which is like $150 million a copy, can't do for the same price. Do you ever see where they kind of make the submarine force smaller but more? Does that make any sense what I'm trying to say? Where you can have 100 units going out automated for patrol that are not crewed by humans doing the same job as one, Virginia class submarine?
The rules of warfare, you hit the nail on the head, Travis. The rules of warfare are being rewritten today in Ukraine. You've had these water drones that are taking out, the massive warships. The rules of warfare are being changed. There's always going to have to be a man in the loop. like I was talking about rules of engagement. We you need a man in the loop to make a decision. We've seen kind of tragic cases where maybe there wasn't a man in the loop in the USS Vincennes when it shot down the Iranian Airbus. I'm not sure what the Aegis weapon system, if it was an automatic then, what they call robo ship, but there always has to be a man in the loop. Nature warfare is changing. There is going to be a lot more automation. I'm not the expert. I have seen, topologies where you have one man ship controlling a number of what we call UUVs underwater, like, drones underwater, right? I do want to say, when you go to sleep at night, say your prayers, pray that we keep a submarine force, because I think the preeminent conflict that will happen in the rest of my lifetime is in the South China Sea. I don't know if we're going to go to war there. I'm not saying we are going to go to war, but it's obviously we're contesting that area. The Chinese have these hypersonic missiles that extend out to about the range of Guam right now. That's basically creating a no-go zone for carriers, because there's really no way to defend against hypersonic missiles, to the best that I've read and understand. And so you've got what's called the second island chain. A service ship cannot penetrate beyond the second island chain in a hot war without being subject to these hypersonic missiles. The only thing that can bring the fight to the enemy in the South China Sea is United States submarines and Australian submarines, if we get those. It's a situation analogous to right after Pearl Harbor. Admiral Nimitz said this. He said after the war, the only thing he had to bring the fight to the enemy immediately after the Pearl Harbor was a submarine force. And they went in. Submarine force was 2% of the United States Navy, sank 55% of the Japanese shipping sank in that war. And I think we have a same situation now where, the only thing that can penetrate past second island chain and survive is a submarine. And whether that will be a Virginia class with maybe a dozen UUVs that they deploy, I'm sure, people are looking at that right now. Like I said, the rules of warfare are being changed. But the short answer to your question, there's always going to be a man in the loop for rules of engagement reasons for to identify. It's not, like just shoot everything on sight. And could a UUV make that decision? I don't think so.
You wrote the book. You've done some other writing. What's next for Mr. Rausch? Are you going to write another book in addition to what you've already written? You do some, private, pilot. So you're under the water now. You're above terra firma. What's next for you, sir?
I do. I've got about a little under 4,000 hours flying. I got a little plane. One of my big kind of concerns is animal welfare. I used to fly. I haven't done it lately for an outfit called Pilots and Paws, where basically you fly dogs from where they're going to be put down a kill shelter to somebody who wants to adopt them. It's kind of like not an overground railroad, I guess, where people will set these up, and sometimes there'll be a bunch of hops. You pick up a dog and fly them somewhere. I like flying dogs. They don't they don't complain. It's like, the old joke, lock your dog and your wife in the trunk. See who's happy when sorry, but dogs don't complain, right? So I like doing that. So I wrote a book. I was actually doing a lot of flying down in Southwest, and I noticed these. The actual border isn't at the Rio Grande down there. It's really about 75 miles north is where all the checkpoints are. And I remember flying down. I work in a satellite company. I put a satellite station down right on the border in next to the Rio Grande. And then when I took off, I flew over. I noticed these checkpoints. And when I was doing the job putting the satellite station in, I noticed all these people walking across the Rio Grande. They'd walk during the day and walk back to the Mexican side at night. They were day workers. And I was thinking, what would stop me from flying these people over? So long story short, I wrote a book along that vine about a fellow who basically gets roped into flying, immigrants across the border checkpoints. And I call it the Hot Wire an Airplane. And it should be out this year.
Nice, nice. How can people connect with you and your book and, see what else you're up to?
I've got a website, henryrausch.com. Henry, Henry, Rausch, Rausch. And you just, drop me a note on that, and I will return return it. I used to have an alias. It's kind of you're more, you run a podcast, you're more techie than I am. I used to have an alias author at henryrausch.com, but it stopped working. So just find that website, and there's an update thing, and I will respond to every single email.
Well, I will have the link to that website in the Oscar Mike Radio show post for this conversation. So you can contact or see what Mr. Rausch is up to anytime you'd like. I just think it's cool that you have brought this light into the depths of submariner service. Bob, the story goes, I was out of the Marine Corps trying to get a job, and Bob was a submariner probably right before you went in, because he retired from IBM, and he liked picking fun at Marines or whatever, but we talked a lot about what he did, the training, emergency servicing, bowels control, all that stuff. And he had a bone to pick with Tom Clancy. He didn't like Red October at all. I do remember that. He liked the fact that the submarines got some movie time, but he's like, that would never happen. That would never happen. So he hated it and liked it at the same time. I do remember that. But past that, some of these things that I've read and talked to other submariners like yourself, it's just I know the Marines like to think that we're an elite community, but I really believe when you dig into what you all do, that you're truly a special, fraternity in military service. So I just thank you for coming on and sharing with me, sir.
Well, it's been really, really wonderful being on your show. Thank you very much, Travis.
Well, there you have it, folks. You want to see a different part of the Navy, and I know the aircraft carriers are really big and easy to see, but underneath the waves lurks a different kind of threat deterrent, and Submerged is all that and more. Commander Rausch, I want to thank you for coming on. As we say in Oscar Mike Radio, we're Oscar Mike Mission Flight. Thank you very much.
The biggest fear Goldstaff families have, that their child will be forgotten.
We need to never forget freedom wasn't free.
It's the fact that they give us the life we have now. We should remember them and give thanks to them.
If I can be a part of something today that's going to make the surviving family of any of these veterans, these heroes, feel better tomorrow, then it's worth it.
That one wreath symbolizes one family that was able to smile because of the generous donations.
To sponsor a wreath and honor a veteran, visit wreathsacrossamerica.org.
Thank you for listening and watching Oscar Mike Radio, where our active duty service members and veterans are in action and the mission is in flight. Oscar Mike Radio is an oversized load co-Sinister One production. If you are a veteran or know a veteran who needs help, please dial 988 and press 1 for the Veterans Crisis Line.